So I have my emulator running, so hopefully everybody has the emulator running also. So I was talking about some sort of activity life cycle the application undergoes depending on your UI stack. UI stack mean, for example, any UI which is currently being displayed, uh, which is understood like the UI is on the top of the stack. Any other UI which is going to be displayed in future may be occupying the top stack. For example, you are viewing this application in your phone. For example, you are seeing SMS now, but if a phone call comes, the dialer will take the topmost stack, and this particular stack, this particular UI will go behind the screen. So you may assume it's minimized or whatever in other terminology as well. But since the limitation of the phone screen, typically a screen where that UI is going to be visible is going to be very limited. So one screen or one particular application alone can be shown, unless if OS default version has been modified to display multiple applications. But still, in a given application, only one view at a time could be shown in this case. Or if any UI which is going to take on the top of it will make sure the currently visible UI goes into background and other comes into foreground. So I was talking about there's some sort of life cycle it undergoes, and there should be a need of identify this programmatically to see what current position the UI is living, or in other words, activity. Activity is a Java class part of Android SDK, which is giving a wrapper for your UI. It means activity contains a blank UI frame whenever it is being called, and later I can attach any design UI developed by XML, and that eventually brought into foreground based on the activity lifecycle it undergoes. The very first one is creation, or creating the view, and later it undergoes various view or activity lifecycle as well. So an activity, in other words, if I say create an activity, mean you need to assume I'm asking you to create an UI. So if I say create activity, mean you have to create a UI. So this is what our understanding here after going to be. To verify that, I've already written a method, implemented a method on create, which is part of activity. Your default hello world program may contain lot of codes. You can duly remove them. Simply keep this code up to this level. For example, the action bar activity, if anything is there, remove it. Just put in activity, because activity is the first the class which on the top every other class got modified. Action bar activity, fragment activity, list view list activity. There are various other activities present, but all activities comes from the class called activity. So the same class I have put it here. It looks like activity class is a fully qualified class, because if I do not implement any methods also, it doesn't throw any error. As we already know, in object-oriented programming, if I try to inherit a class, if the class is abstract, any unimplemented or abstract method should get implemented. If not, it will simply inherit and all the methods. So in this case, activity is not abstract class, it's a fully qualified class, but since it has various options to intervene the UI stack, we are going to use this class and create our own class called main activity. From there, we are going to see is there any way I can add a UI. As I was talking about, the very first lifecycle start from the method called onCreate. So I was telling the need of having a log instead of console to identify which statement or which activity is printing the console output. The first one, I'm going to type main activity, saying something else. If you are using the same name again and again, we have a habit in object-oriented programming. If you are using some object, we have to make it some sort of, we have to use a modularity in place. So instead of having this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create I'm going to give a name tag, not necessarily private, could be a public also, because anyway it's not going to be modified because the keyword final I have put. So in this case I'm going to make this one simply I put tap. If I need to modify this, I can any point of time I can modify this. Who's one? So we'll have to first verify whether it is running or working better or not. So first thing, I'm going to hit run button. Wait until it boots. I already have some messaging app open, but it will overtake the one which I'm trying to install. Will make sure it will replace the existing screen. I'm probably putting that screen into background and bring this screen into foreground. If you notice, this is where the console output I can directly see. We call it logcat. Otherwise, you can go to another exclusive view, which is called Android Device Monitor. This is from the right, the second icon. So you can you have a lot of option to debug your device and virtually recreate SMS and phone call making or something like that. You can even view a file system. So any one you can use it, but some people feel okay, this is a second one I need to open. Why should I use it? But if at all required. So in this case, I've already added a filter. Here also I can view my console output. So it looks like it is printing create called something like that. So it means my activity is just now created. Now we'll see various other ways to debug, but I'm not going to need this because I'll be fine seeing the log in the main screen itself. I'm going to close. So I'm going to depend on this log cat. Since I close, I need to rerun my application. Okay, it's there. So a couple of other activity lifecycle methods I'm going to put. I was talking about the sequence, so I would advise you to have this at least in your mind how a typical active life cycle will go on. Create, resume, pause, stop, destroy finally. Sorry. So these are all the activity life cycle I have implemented. There are other in between some sort of life cycle also exist, but these are all the major I mean the cycle where the activity gives us a kind of control for us, so to detect what is the state of the UI. I'm going to put a log statement for all. I'm trying to see what kind of sequence it's going to be. It's going to print. Resume. So I have put a log statement for all. So it means if these functions are called, it will print a console output. So start from create, resume, pause, stop, and destroy. Creation means the very first time your object is created, mean your view is being rendered. Maybe application was closed already, or the very first time after installing your application you are opening this particular app. So it will start from on create. And resume mean if a created application could be resumed, or background application can also be resumed, so for that resume. The pause and stop pretty much same and same meaning, but literal understanding of pause and stop is something going to be stopped. The destroy, maybe a minimized application is also being destroyed. So these are all the some sort of literal understanding about this life cycle, but we have to put them into use, and then we'll identify how this sequence is followed. So again I'm going to hit run, I'll clear the existing log not to get confused. So see, if you notice, the previous tag disappeared, mean the again the previous application also came. Okay, it's not the create call twice, but it this console output, if you notice, the timestamp is 5 minutes away, so it's a previous one. So the application called create and receive together one by one. As you know, the application became visible to your screen. So it has called create receive. Now two possibilities: either user will hit back button or user will press home button. So home button, in our understanding, it's a minimize, or maybe application only loses the view, but still eventually running. The back, not only application is invisible, it also closes the applications. It means any object which is created by this particular activity would also be destroyed. So two possibilities. I'm going to hit back. If you notice, three functions one by one called pause, stop, destroy. It means my application very first time started, it called two methods, create and receive together, one by one, sorry, not together. When I hit back button, which is a kind of a little understanding of closing your application, executed three functions one by one: pause, stop, destroy. Okay, what is pause and what is stop? What kind of difference both are actually telling us? Destroy, I could understand, the application completely closed. But what kind of difference the pause and stop is going to make? You have to have a little creativity or maybe imagination power to understand this. Right now application is visible. It only call create and receive, of course, because the application previously was closed. So it will call again and the cycle will restart, or probably it will do the same thing. When I click back button, if I have a high speed resolution, when I click back, if you notice that UI, it's not immediately become invisible. It becomes smaller, 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 and finally it becomes so small and finally disappears. So a kind of a sequence. So again I'll show you, if you could imagine. When I hit back, the rectangle size became smaller and finally one point the UI completely disappeared. So from the exact screen to when the application is reaching a smallest view is called, in between that time is called pause. When pause is executed, the UI may be visible or may not be visible because the UI is about to get minimized. UI is becoming smaller but still showing in some small amount of, in a very fraction of second. On stop, make sure yes, UI completely removed from the foreground. It's not showing now. So the pause is an in-between state of completely going away from the foreground. You have to imagine yourself that application, it's not immediately closed, it just become the view area or view holder becomes smaller, smaller, smaller. One point only it gets completely removed from the foreground. So this particular place, it is confirming the UI is totally invisible, but in this case on pause, UI is getting closed, but it's not completely removed from the foreground. So on pause is a between state where the visibility and invisibility is happening. From the visible state to reaching just before a step of invisible state is called on pause. In this case, on stop, completely the UI is invisible. Of course, in this case, application may be minimized or destroyed. Depending on the sequence, the control will get executed. If the application only minimized, it won't go execute this function. If the application is closed, it will execute this function. So that's the significance of these two methods, even though it continue or gives us a same meaning. A pause is a between state of visible and invisible, and on stop is a confirmed state of invisibility. Destroy, it's a confirmed state of application no more active in the foreground, or not in foreground or background. So if your application, if you notice only on stop called, not the on destroy called, you can safely assume your application is minimized, it is not closed. It means your application is still running. If your application, if you notice the destroy is called, your application is closed. Okay, so I don't know how to clear this, guys. Okay, now I'll rerun more time. Going to first time open my application, create, resume one by one. Okay, why the create and resume, that also is a discussion. Now I'm going to hit home button, pause and stop call, but it is not executing destroy, so it is very clear my application has got minimized. Now I'm going to open my application one more time through the launcher. If you notice, the application only prints resume, it does not call create, mean your application which is already created, so not necessary to recreate. So from only it did is what it did is it simply brought the background application into foreground, etc. Mean your UI is visible. So hitting back will execute within this cycle, for example pause and stop, and again bringing it back will take us resume over. Things will turn or take into a different approach when I hit back button. It will also do a pause, stop, and finally one point it will call destroy. And of course your application no more in viewer, and then I need to go and open the application again, and again it will start from create resume. So if a destroy is called, the application start from create. If destroy is not called, the create block is never called. It means your application is somewhere in the background coming into foreground and going background again and again. Minimize, minimize, maximize, minimize, maximize, that's happening. Any point if you notice the create is called, your application which was maybe closed by the user by hitting back button, or your phone itself would have shut down. For example, you are viewing this application, your phone battery went away. So phone battery gone mean naturally none of the application could reside. So not only you, the system also can kill the application. So in that case your application is closed, been destroyed. So if create is called, it's very clear that the application no more in background. So first time the application is created. That's the reason the resume block is also called. It is telling that creation went successfully. That's what I was talking about. Any application activity lifecycle will confirm the previous state. So resume call means activity creation successfully completed. So that's very clearly gives me, okay, the previous step went successfully. Similarly, the stop is called to tell the pause went successfully. It means application completely removed from the foreground, from the holder, and it is only not visible. Destroy, of course, ultimately tell, in fact, it is not only invisible, it has been completely closed. So each life cycle confirms the previous state. And this is what you need to verify today. And you have to write a simple Android application. You know how to create a simple Android application. Yesterday I was explaining about giving the package name, application name, and of course activity, whatever XML name if it comes. And make sure once you see your Hello World application, clean up your code and remove all action bar, menu, all the codes, make it plain empty, and make this as activity, and implement all the 5 methods. Fire your emulator, check what sequence it is printing. Try to press various buttons, try to emulate a phone call, try to send SMS. Is there anything happening to my application? You can notice. You have to do a small scrutinization of understanding how the activity lifecycle undergoes in various circumstances. I only reproduced with the emulator, by hitting home and back button, but chances are there phone call will come. What will happen to my activity? So you need to identify, check whether the activity is completely closed or the activity still runs in the background, or maybe if SMS comes, what will happen, or there are chances maybe I cannot reproduce other thing, if phone switched off or something happens, so what all sequence it will undergo. So this is what we need to understand today, and this is what the activity life cycle. To make that, first you need to get used to create Android application, clean up your hello world application, create a vanilla ready application, like have everything extend from activity class only, and have your emulator started, and keep your console log. See, there are various tabs are there. You have to make sure you are in the Android tab and your emulator name is visible here, and you can start seeing the output here. Initially you will see everything, but you can safely attach a filter. For example, this is the console output of your entire device, mean the console output printed from various processes inside your your emulator, because emulator contains various apps, each apps may be printing their own messages. So in that you can apply a filter, select your own package, so you will see your application filters alone, mean your application console output alone, and then you can understand in what sequence these things being printed. So this is what you need to do today. After that, uh, once you have get rid of all the issues or memory related thing, our next part would be learning UI designing. Of course, again we are getting into a UI design. Typically in Android program, activity takes a major role, mean in that the main part is going to be UI design, because activity is something to do with the UI. This time we have to recall our HTML programming techniques also, because it is similar to it, but we are going to use XML to create our UIs. So that particular file is actually residing in the resource folder, and a folder called layout. There is one XML file, activity main. If you open it, initially you will see a device preview, but there is one also there, text view, where you can see the equivalent XML file of the same, to which is actually producing this view. If you notice, there is a small text view is printer or text is printer. Then equivalent convention, we don't have CSS here, so but we have a predefined layout file which has a predefined layout attribute values. For example, in HTML we only have a div tag. Later I need to give a box based design and have a float left to make sure everything arranged to left. Then the div start behaving as rules defined in CSS. But in this case we do not have that technique. But instead we have a predefined layout such as relative layout, linear layout, frame layout, table layout, grid layout, of course various layouts which is doing the predefined job. Two layout I'll simply explain. Relative layout having a capability to align or keep its parent either top, left, right, bottom position. So it can force a particular child. In this case, the child in this case is a text view. Text view you may consider equivalent to a label in Android, sorry, in HTML. Label we put for a button form. I hope you remember, just before form or input text we put a label. So it is equivalent to that. So a relative layout can put the child element either in top, bottom, left and right directions, positions. Linear layout can put their child either in horizontal or vertical position. Horizontal, vertical, that's a two orientation property the linear layout contains. A frame layout does not contain orientation property, however, it has stacking capability. For example, a frame layout you may imagine as if you have a photo frame. In the photo frame, if you put a larger picture photo, the large picture will be shown. In that, if you put even a small photo on the top of a larger picture, both picture would be shown, but one will be on the top of another. So like that, you may imagine a frame layout can have a stack of child on the top. Since it doesn't have a orientation or aligning capability, it will keep everything on the top of another. And apart from that, we have a padding margin and everything already there. So whatever we have, but we have to understand slightly in detail in this case. But UI development, I'll take it, because UI development we are going to do comprehensive exercises. And of course, whatever the exercise I demanded in HTML5 also I'm going to demand here. Uh, the calculator look and layout, the calculator app right now we are going to rewrite in entirely on Android. So there we will create a UI, and we will redesign everything through Java. So that part also we will do it. So your very first exercise I want you to do a simple exercise on activity lifecycle. Open your Android Studio, write your code, and implement all these uh, 5 lifecycle methods. Keep a log printed, a log statement written, and start your emulator. Check in what sequence these things are printed, and get yourself comfortable with that. So today's requirement to get used to Android Studio, emulator, log system, debugging system, and everything. And if you want to take a screenshot of your device, you can go to Android device monitor. There will be a camera icon or something like that. You can take a screenshot of your device also. So that also you can do. Your emulator screenshot can be taken. If you have your real device, for example, Android device, you can directly connect it with your computer USB port. If at all you have access to USB port. If the device is connected, the device name would appear here. So you can still directly execute. Hitting a run command will make sure your application directly installed in your phone rather than the emulator. So we don't need to have the emulator at all. But for that to happen, you have to make sure sufficient drivers installed. So drivers usually given by the vendors. If you buy the device from Motorola, Motorola will have a website where you can download the drivers. So like that, the drivers will be available from the respective vendor side. Pardon? The virtual device is really the same as what the mobile we use. It's exactly same, but it has some limitation. One, camera, you cannot emulate it. You can emulate, but you cannot take a real picture if you do not have a webcam. There is no Bluetooth, and there is no Wi-Fi option. So if your application demands such a requirement, then you have to use the device alone. There is no way. But for other exercise, you can use emulate. Bluetooth, Wi-Fi related exercise, I really see a very less requirement, because enterprise application, I don't think you guys will do something on the hardware side. But almost some 90% of our development we can easily do with the emulator itself. But a recommendation for a professional Android developer is to test on the device. So you have to demand your managers to give your a test phone or something like that. So I don't know. I really don't have idea, because I checked with your manager. They're saying they don't have provision. They don't even give plans, so why would they? That's it. Obvious thing. But of course they have to. They should give. So that's the right approach. Anyway, so you guys start your simple hands-on. Today is a very simple one. I'll put this source code to the developer site. But ultimately, tomorrow when I start the exercise, it is understandable. You have your Android Studio open, your emulator is already up and running, then you start listening. So that's what I want every day. You morning come and start it. For example, if you are making a code change, you don't need to close your emulator. You can keep on hitting run button whenever you do a change in Android code. Click run. This code will update here itself. If you close it, make sure you wait until some 10 minutes to get your emulator again started, and you can start your exercise. So I would advise don't close it. Okay, fine. I'll publish them. Let's see. I don't think I need to publish. It's pretty simple one, so you can start your simple hands-on.